Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Michael Hill, and I work for the Funding Data and Financial Monitoring team. I'm here to discuss with you today the LA assurance and the financial collections that me and my team deal with. What we'll be covering is listed below there. So it's any local authority collections, brief introduction to the Section 251 budget and outturn, legal framework, a little bit about the collect system that we use for the uploading of some of the collections, some regular errors we receive in submissions, the delivery cycle for the Section 251 collections, the statistical releases that we do using information that we receive from yourselves. So firstly, I'm going to talk about the DSG statement. As you can see there, this is collected under S151 of the Local Government Act. The CFO of the local authorities are responsible for making the necessary arrangements for the local financial management controls. Under these arrangements, the CFO will need to ensure that the grant monies and the DSG are expended for the purpose for which they are intended. The assurance statement provides an audit to document how the DSG has been deployed and whether there were any issues, for instance, fraud cases within LA maintained schools. The formal terms of the grant given by the Secretary of State under Section 16 of the Education Act. The deadline for submitting this year's assurance statement, I believe, is the 5th of November. And I think that's done through the information exchange portal. And moving on to CFR. The CFR framework provides a standard template for schools to collect information about their income and expenditure by financial years, which maintained schools provide to the local authorities in a financial statement each year. These statements include schools' resources received in the financial year, including any unspent from the previous year, the application of any school resources, and the summary of the school's financial position at the end of the financial year. This information is uploaded to ourselves through the collect system, and this data that we collect is used to support the benchmarking and a comparison of schools' income and expenditure. So here is just a outline of the milestones for the CFR collection for this year. So as you can see there, it shows you when the blade goes live, when we carry out our validation of the data that is submitted, when the collect blade is closed to schools and local authorities, and when we would expect the CFR data to be available on the benchmarking website and gov.co.uk. So this one just is a link to the school's performance website. I think, as Alex stated, he will send out a copy of the slides to everybody, so it's just something for you selves to have a look at if you have a chance. It gives you the information there on how to access it and what you can look at, etc. This is a breakdown of the CFR numbers. As you can see there, expecting just over 12,655 schools to submit, and we managed to authorise 12,649 of those. We only had 5 schools from across 2 LAs that we weren't able to authorise. So school financial benchmarking website, which I mentioned before there, it's basically a cloud-based application that helps for benchmarking schools and academies, and it uses a range of comparison algorithms. It enables for quick and easy data entry, helps with management of school and academy data, and provides visualization and financial charts to help with these comparisons. The purpose of the school financial benchmarking tool is to provide schools with the ability to make comparisons between an individual school or academy trust spending in various categories with those of similar schools or similar trusts. This can be used by school leaders to inform spending decisions and to identify if or how spending changes could be made to support progress with the available level of resource. Prior to this being released in 2017, we ran two separate benchmarking websites. Because the two sites were separate, it wasn't possible to sort of easily compare between the LA and the academies. So furthermore, the LA benchmarking site was created in 2002 using old technology and leading to reduce in how efficient it was to be used. So now we're going to move on to the section 251, budget first of all. So local authorities are required under section 251 of the Apprenticeships, Skills, Children and Learning Act to prepare and submit statements of the education and children's services spending and income. The 2009 Act superseded the section 52 of the School Standards and Framework Act 1998 and compelled local authorities to submit similar data to the department. Local authorities complete and submit their returns using the department's centralised data collection and management system for education. Collect. Local authorities must submit their budget by the published deadline, which is usually around the end of April each year. So furthermore, on budget involves a high volume of detailed data within a number of defined tables, with an aggregate of over 500 cells of data across the three tables and 152 local authorities each submitting an annual 251 budget return. Around 76,000 items of data are submitted to the ESFA. The budget statement is intended to provide a clear picture of the local authority's planned spending. This includes how much a local authority intends to spend on things such as schools budget, de-delegated items, high needs, early years, central provision, children and young people's services. It's important that schools forums and others can compare funding between different local authorities to have an informed debate about budget levels and use of funds. So the statements that we receive are used by ourselves for publication of statistics, benchmarking tables for local authorities, and for answering, where necessary, any parliamentary questions and other requests for data. And there's a link there on the slide, which is to the guidance, the section 251. So following on from the budget, we have the outturn, which again, as with the budget, is covered by the legislation noted on the slide. Local authorities must submit their outturn statements by around the 25th of August each year. We are currently going through these as we speak, doing QA on our end. Section 251 outturn statement. It's intended to provide schools and others with an interest in education and children's services with details about schools and local authorities' funding and expenditure. It can inform Parliament in its role of monitoring the department's accountability for public funds. MPs may ask about school and local authority expenditure via the mechanism of parliamentary questions or through the Education Select Committee. As with the budget, the outturn data is required also to inform and debate about different levels of expenditure between local authorities and schools. The outturn statements are used by the Department for Education for publishing statistics, again the benchmarking tables, and any further sort of questions in relation to parliamentary issues. Ourselves in the funding data and financial monitoring team, which we have overall responsibility for ensuring that the collections are delivered on time and data validation undertaken so that we have a robust data set. We work with numerous stakeholders in the education data division who project manage collections, data outputs who write technical specifications, and publish statistical releases, and technical development unit who develop the collect blade for the collection. We are currently going through the QA of this, myself, and there's only 5 of us in total to go through the 152 returns that we receive. So the earlier and the more quality data we can receive is beneficial for us all. This is just an outline of the delivery cycle for the section 251. So as you can see, the blue on the outside is the budget, and the green on the inside is the outturn. So yearly cycles, the funding data management team have overall responsibility for ensuring that these collections are delivered on time. And as I stated before, we work with other stakeholders to ensure these milestones are hit. The budget highlighted in blue there starts between September to January, where we collate the forthcoming budget table requirements, including any changes or admissions to the table from internal colleagues, such as early years or policy. We will also consult with LA contacts for feedback or improvement suggestions for forthcoming collections. As part of the internal consultation, we ask policy colleagues if any aspect of this section 251 could be reduced, as we appreciate that this is a large data collection and takes time to complete. The next section then involves the development of the collect blade and the consultation exercise. The live collection stage is a very active part for ourselves in the funding team. Normally goes live around the beginning of March, with LAs having till around the end of April each year to complete their returns. Although the blade does stay open longer than that for ourselves to conduct our validation process and raise any issues that we may have with our LA contacts. So I'm not going to go through it all there. That you can see the outturn follows a similar process cycle wise, but is run slightly later than the budget. So just briefly, just going to talk about the collect system that we use to collect some of the data for our collections. This is used by schools, local authorities, and ourselves for processing data collection returns. One of the major benefits of the portal is that it's real-time collection. Basically, you guys in the LAs can view exactly the same information as we can. So when any queries can arise, we can open up returns, and they're there immediately for yourselves to see. Or if you're submitting a return, it's a live thing for us then to be able to see our end. The collect portal is accessed via the department's secure access system. Collect itself has inbuilt validation and error parameters, which alerts the inputter of the information to figures that may appear to be out of an expected range that we'd be looking at, and that allows you to enter notes through the error report to give an explanation for this figure, or if the figure is incorrect, obviously this then flags it up to yourselves and you can amend if necessary. We have recently, I think this is the second year or third year that we've introduced the Excel pro forma, which the local authorities can populate and upload to collect, just simply with a click of the button. We're hoping this to streamline the collection stage for yourselves, while also hopefully making the validation process easy for ourselves. But the manual data function is still available if people prefer to enter it in that manner. So this is just a little note of some of the areas that are covered for the budget. As I mentioned earlier, it's a vast data collection, and it collects key information. So we also look at information collected via the 3 tables: the local authority, the high need, and the early years table within the section 251. This is the first table that is presented on the section 251 and contains detailed information on things like SEN transport down to museum and library services. This slide just shows some of the data that is contained within the LA table. This may be difficult to see on the slide, but this is just a look at the high needs table. At the local authority level, the section 251 provides information on high needs budgets. One particular area, for example, is hospital education. So hospital education is a separate factor. The section 251 has been the department's means to identify local authority spend. From this table, you can see that authority budgeting for hospital education services vary considerably. So that's just an outline again of some of the information that we do look to collect through these collections. And again, finally here, the early years table. Alongside the early years NFF, we also made a number of significant changes to the rules that govern how local authorities fund early years providers to deliver the 3/4 year old entitlements in order to ensure the successful delivery of the 30 hours of free childcare that came in. Within the constraints of the financial regulations and in consultation with the schools forum, the local authority have the freedom to decide how they fund their providers locally. For the early years, the section 251 budget data has a number of uses. We're dependent on the LA budget data to monitor compliance against the new funding policies from 17-18. We've recently started using the budget data to determine the supplementary funding allocations for maintained nursery schools. The budget also allows us to determine how funding for entitlements is distributed across the LA and provider types, an average funding rate for local authorities that pay the different early years providers, how much of the central government funding LA is retained centrally. The budget data is also used to produce the early years funding benchmarking tool, which allows the public to see how local authorities are funding their early years providers. This tool is published annually, and this is just a note here on the statistical releases. I have another colleague who is just going to talk briefly about the statistical releases.
I think that's my cue, isn't it, Michael? Thank you.
It is, yes.
Hi all. So my name's Charlotte Housden-Rowe. I'm the team leader for the School Workforce and Finance Statistics team. My colleague Julie is also on the call as well. We are the team responsible for analysing the data which you provide. So Michael's gone through and touched on quite a lot of the outputs which we contribute to and we produce. So on the slide at the moment, obviously you can see the budget, the planned expenditure, and the Outturn publication as well. So it's really timely today because our budget publication has actually gone out this morning. That's a sort of national picture, but you can also go down to your local authority level as well of all of the planned expenditure. I can see that there has been a question as well from Olivia about the section 251 Outturn publication. So that publication, so the second bullet point just there, that's due for publication in December. And again, it will be on the Explore Education Statistics platform, ready for you to take a look at. So the reason why I wanted to jump in on here today is to pretty much just introduce ourselves as a team and to help you put a sort of face on this as well from the statistics point of view. And I also wanted to kind of let you know just how important it is to us that we receive data in a really timely and a good quality fashion as well. So as has always been drilled into me from a data aspect, you know, you put good stuff in, you get good stuff out, and the reverse is obviously true. So it's really important for us that we get data which is of good quality, so that we're able to help our policy colleagues draw up the most sturdy and most appropriate policy decisions from there, because as you know, if you don't have good statistics to back up your policy decisions, then they are much more likely to fall down, and that's not what we want to do. So some of the kind of hot topics at the moment, which we can see from the budget point of view, are things like the levelling up agenda, which you will have heard from various different outputs recently. That's a big governmental objective. So you can talk finance, you can talk levelling up. There's obviously always quite a lot of interest in making sure that there's money going into areas such as high needs places, making sure that there's enough funding there per person, per capita, per pupil, however you want to frame it. That's where all of our figures are going into. In terms of the timeliness of the data, that as well, from our perspective, is really important so that these decisions can be made timely. And also it means that we as statisticians have more time to interrogate that data and to draw on SME knowledge, so from yourselves, from policy colleagues, from various different people around DFE and different arm's length bodies, that we can draw context from them, that we can put, you know, reasons to the findings that we're seeing. And that goes for both planned expenditure, so your budget, and also the outturn. So as I say, what I'm kind of here for today is to just stress that quality, timeliness, it's all really important to us. I'm sure it's all really important to you as well. And yeah, that's kind of me really.
On the consistency of data, I think what we're finding as well is there is inconsistency out there. Section 251 accounts data, RO data is not consistent. So when we're looking at the big picture of like the DSG deficits and trying to make decisions on who we support, who we don't support, there's a lot of deciphering what the real position is. Because I mean, the accounts should be the same as a Section 251. The RO forms should be the same as a Section 251 and the accounts. Yet in some authorities, and the CFO assurance statement should be the same as all of those, especially on the bottom line. But we're finding some authorities manage to put a different figure into every return they give us. That is extreme, but it's just to be mindful how all your returns do effectively report back on the same position for the councils. There shouldn't be a discrepancy between any of them.
Oh, hello there, everyone. Yes, it says the release covering the 1920 financial year was published in September 2019.
Yes, so that is because of the 1920 data, with it being the planned expenditure, that would have been collected around April, May, June time of 2019, with the projection for the 1920 financial year. And then because we have the validation timescales, yeah, so the equivalent of that one, which we actually had published this morning, is the 2020 to 21 financial year, which we published, like I say, this morning, so September 2021. So we essentially published the budget midway through the budget of which it's talking about.
And then the second one, the outturn, also I wanted to challenge, yes, the release covering the 1920 financial year. Is that supposed to be 20 to 21 financial year? And then the January
yes.
22.
So that would have been, so our most recent one, if I maybe kind of draw it into the most recent one as opposed to the ones which are on there. So the 2019-20 coverage, so if you think about the link being 2019-20, that was published in January 2021. So the next one which we will be publishing is the 2020-21 financial year, and we will be publishing that in December of this year. So again, to allow for collection at the end of last financial year, validation, analysis and approval for December this year.
And then I have another colleague, Dan, if you're on the line, who's going to talk us through something in relation to the SFVS.
The biggest change that you'll notice this year if you're downloading the SFVS is that the checklist and dashboard have been separated, so they're no longer in the same document. The reason for this is because the old Excel dashboard part of it, which had the financial metrics, had quite a few accessibility concerns, and it wasn't something that was considered suitable anymore for gov.uk. So instead what we've done is actually move the dashboard online onto the school's financial benchmarking website. Because of this, and not needing the Excel functionality, we've been able to move the checklist into Word, which again makes it more accessible for people. You've got some of the deadlines for when your SFVS will need to be submitted this year, but all of that sort of information you can find on gov.uk very easily. In terms of the other major changes, there's a slight update to a section on related party transactions. So there will be a bit more of a requirement for schools to report their RPTs, and local authorities have been given a small grant known as the Financial Transparency Grant, which asks them to provide a role in scrutinising RPTs from schools, particularly focusing on those that are over a certain value, which is at £20,000. This is our first year with this, so we'll appreciate feedback as the year goes on to see if it's working in the authorities. There's also an update to section E, which is about value for money, and this is only supposed to correspond with changes to the updated procurement policy. There is also reference to something that was asked in the sidebar here, which is a new benchmarking tool called View My Financial Insights. There are now two official DFE benchmarking tools. You've got the benchmarking site, and you've also got VMFI, which is accessible using an IDAMS password. We also have a bit more information on integrated curriculum and financial planning. I'm not going to go through the related party transactions guidance in detail because it's all online and you'll be getting these slides anyway. But this spells out the basic rules and things that you need to ask your schools to follow. I'm going to do a quick demo of how you get to the self-assessment dashboard for schools now on the school's financial benchmarking website. If you're on a computer, and I'm guessing you 100% all are, please do feel free to go to the site yourself, and you can examine a school that you know well. What you do is you click on, you find a school that you're interested in, you go to Start a Comparison. You'll be offered three choices. You can do the regular sort of benchmarking comparisons that you used to be able to do on the site, it still can, but we've also added the self-assessment dashboard. This is also replacing the SRM SAP, which is the academy version of the school's financial value standard. I've gone for one called Harlow here, Hare Street here, which spells it all out. Hare Street, as you can see, is a fairly uniform school, broadly in line with similar schools on most of its expenditure categories. Not particularly exciting until you get over here to the average teacher cost. If we look at somewhere like St Wilfrid's Roman Catholic school, there's a little bit more of interest to look at. If you click onto any of these tooltips, you'll be able to find more information about how we organise the bandings. You can see that St Wilfrid's has a negative in-year balance, and so they might be the sort of candidate for a school that wants to look at this site and identify savings from it. One of the criticisms we get of this tool is that it can have quite sort of permissive boundaries, so you'll see that they're broadly in line with similar schools in lots of areas. That's why it's really important to encourage your schools to go in and do more sort of in-depth benchmarking activities rather than the surface level self-assessment dashboards. I've picked another one here, Eaton Park. Again, this is the sort of school where you can see that they are out of step, you could say, with some of their similar schools. I think in particular this point here about administrative and clerical staff is perhaps an area they might want to look at. But then, of course, one of the things we would absolutely insist on when we're talking to schools and LAs and really everybody about this sort of tool is this is a school that's actually doing fantastically well. And so a red RAG rating doesn't necessarily mean that the school is doing badly. It just means that it is out of line with its statistical neighbours. Now, that might not be a bad thing. We're not trying to encourage a race to the median. And I think this is a perfect example for a school where actually maybe some of these sections that are flagged red may actually be contributing to the success of the school. I think I've probably used up my 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop there. There's a question there about raw data. So we do use the data that was submitted in the last financial submission. schools can also edit their data and make a side-by-side comparison. So if you're asking your schools to use budget data or anything like that, they can use the freshest and most up-to-date data they have to create their dashboards.
Yes, so that's all from me and my colleagues today. So thank you all very much for coming along.